Welcome to the Stories Told podcast. This is episode 97. Can't Keep a Hero Down. This is the Stories Told podcast. Two authors talking about stories in movies, TV, and of course, books.
I'm Michael Grayford. I write action-adventure stories in fantasy and sci-fi worlds, sometimes for younger readers and sometimes for adults. And I try to always inject at least a little bit of humor.
And I am author E.W. Barnes, and I write action-adventure, time travel novels, and space opera science fiction. Thousands of years, thousands of worlds. But be forewarned, beyond here, there will be spoilers. Are you ready for the adventure? Let's begin. Welcome back to the Stories Told podcast. I'm author E.W. Barnes, and with me is author Michael Grayford. And today we're talking about the story told in the movie, The Incredibles. How are you doing today, Mike?
I'm doing great today. How are you?
Doing well as well, thank you. And what's new in your writing world?
New in the writing world is nothing yet. I moved, and then I moved again in a week. So that was a lot of packing, unpacking, moving, setting stuff up. I finished moving most of the stuff into the new place. Well, it was all moved into the new place, but in terms of like unpacking and setting things up, I still have a little bit to do with that, but it's mostly there, and then you have to do all the address changes and things like that. So I'm mostly done with it. Still have a little bit, but then after that, hopefully I can get back into writing again.
Yeah.
So maybe February will be a good start, because January was pretty much a wash. How's your writing going?
It's going well. I finished a chapter on Meridian and about halfway through the next chapter in the story. So I don't know, it's like chapter 7 or 8, I think. So yeah, just sort of moving along now. I'm kind of got a rhythm going, and I'm very happy about that.
Great.
So I want to get these stories done. They're fun stories. I'm glad to be back into this universe. I really enjoy it. It's a good universe. I think there's a lot of, in my opinion, fun elements to these stories, and I'm hoping that they will be enjoyable to others as well. Speaking of stories, what interesting stories have you come across lately in books, movies, or television?
I think I mentioned last time I was working my way through Brandon Sanderson's Skyward series.
Yes.
So I finished book 3 of that, which was also very enjoyable and entertaining. And I think there's one more, at least full book. There might be like short stories or novellas or something in that world. So yeah, so I finished book 3 of that. And as soon as I can get another credit on Audible, I'll do book 4.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's honestly, if I watched anything, I don't think I've really been watching too much other than what we're going to talk about today. How about you? What have you been consuming story-wise?
As I mentioned in the last podcast, I have finished the Fablehaven series. And so as I was trying to think about what I wanted to read next, I went ahead and just grabbed an old favorite, The Lord of the Rings. So I'm reading The Lord of the Rings, which I have read multiple times since I was a teenager. So it's sort of like just returning to a favorite haunt, like a happy place. So
Yeah.
you and I have talked about what book we'd like to talk about next on the podcast, which we're thinking about doing Skyward, the first book in the series that you are now reading, the Brandon Sanderson series that you're now reading. And so I think it'll be easy, because I know The Lord of the Rings so well. It'll be easy to just sort of set that aside and read Skyward, and then get back to The Lord of the Rings whenever I am ready to do that, because it is just such a familiar thing to read. As far as watching, yeah, and I just love it. It's just something I love from, way, way back.
I mean, it's the classic fantasy, right? It's like
it really is
the godfather of modern fantasy, I guess.
Yep. As far as watching stuff, we are, I think, 3 episodes away from finishing The Good Place.
Oh, okay.
And we may do that today. We may finish it today. And as I mentioned before, I went ahead and ordered a couple of DVDs for Doctor Who. So I've been working my way through episodes of the 9th Doctor, and that's been a lot of fun. So, yeah.
The 9, was that Christopher Eccleston? Is that
Yes.
when they first rebooted it? Okay. It seems like so long ago now that was out.
It's over 20 years.
Is it? Wow.
I think it's exactly 20 years ago. I think they rebooted in, what was it, 2004? I'm guessing 2004,
Yeah,
2005.
that sounds about right,
So,
probably. Somewhere around then.
so we're talking 20 years.
Wow. They're still going. That's good.
Yeah, that was a successful reboot, no doubt. Are you ready to talk about The Incredibles?
Yeah, let's dive in.
Today we're talking about the story told in the movie The Incredibles, and I will read the summary that comes up from IMDb. Married superheroes Mr. Incredible and Elastigirl are forced to assume mundane lives as Bob and Helen Parr after all superpowered activities have been banned by the government. While Mr. Incredible loves his wife and kids, he longs to return to a life of adventure, and he gets a chance when summoned to an island to battle an out-of-control robot. Soon, Mr. Incredible is in trouble, and it's up to his family to save him. Did you enjoy this movie?
Yeah, I like this movie. I will say, though, that it didn't hold up as well for me on a rewatch. I'd only seen it one time before, and I'll get into why later. But overall, yeah, I think it's a very fun movie. You know, Pixar tends to do good things, and I think they did that here as well. I really loved the setup of this story, where you have superheroes who aren't allowed to use their powers anymore. And I think you can imagine how awful that would be. It's like
Yeah.
you go from being a superhero with all these extraordinary abilities, and then you can't use them, and you have to work a normal job. That would be awful. It'd be
Yeah.
just terrible. So you can totally empathize with the main character, even though you can't relate to him. You can totally get why he and Frozone would go out, clandestinely and still try to fight crime. Like, you have some of that old feeling back, feeling like you're being useful again, especially depending on the kind of job you have. I mean, his was just dreadful. So, yeah, I think that's a great setup. And it really puts us into a situation where that's going to change, right? They're going to get into the mix again. So that's good. I loved how the family members are all very distinct, not only with their powers, which I think helps separate them out, but their characters are very distinct. How they behave, what their attitudes and personalities are. So I think that really worked a lot. We get to see them not as just, this single unit of a family, but individuals within the family. And I think that's important for what comes in the story later and how they use those. So we see that set up well. And I think there's a lot of things that are set up well at the beginning and then are paid off at the end. In terms of obviously the overarching story of the superheroes being able to return to action, in terms of Mr. and Mrs. Incredible working out their issues, in terms of the kids being able to play their part and finally be able to use their powers, at least to some extent, to, if nothing else, to take part in the superhero aspect of things. So I think structurally the story works very well. There's a lot of good setups and payoffs, a lot of good character development and relational development between the characters. I think the final act is fairly predictable. I think because of the setups, you kind of know where it's going and you know how it's going to work out for the most part. But the fun comes in seeing the characters use their powers, right, individually and together. That really worked. I think it's fun to watch, and it delivers on the promise of the story in terms of getting to see these different superhero characters work together, grow, and we get to see unique abilities and combined abilities. So I think it delivered well. Overall, I thought it was a very fun movie, and it was nice to watch it again. What about you? What are your positive thoughts on The Incredibles?
I enjoy this movie, and I've actually seen it multiple times because I had offspring that sort of grew up on it and watched it multiple times. So,
Okay.
and it still, to me, still worked. There were a couple of things when I looked at it from a writer, and we can talk about that a little bit, that I was sort of like, oh, okay, that doesn't seem like that works real well. But for the most part, I enjoyed it. And one of the things that I think is most enjoyable is what I call the delicious world building. They put this story in sort of a mid-century modern environment, and then were so consistent with everything that they did for the world building with regard to that framework. It's just like you never get taken out of the story because of a failure of the world building, from the music to just everything that's around them, their environment, the world that they're in is so consistent with that, mid-century modern framework. And it's just so much fun to watch. I really enjoy that. And the other thing that I really enjoy is something that you've already mentioned, which is these characters are so unbelievably relatable. You know what their needs are essentially in the first 15 minutes, the first 15 minutes of their story now. After you learn about them no longer being able to be superheroes and they're now in their quiet lives, and then you're introduced to their quiet lives and you see all their needs. They're right out there, right out front. He is in a dead-end job that he hates. She is trying to do her best being a mom. She's probably the one who enjoys it the most, but her need is for her family to kind of come together within her worldview, which is we can't be supers anymore. But everybody else is really frustrated with that in their own way.
Yeah.
He's frustrated because he can't save the world anymore. Dash is frustrated because he can't be who he is and really throw himself into all of the gifts that he has. Violet is frustrated because she doesn't know who she's supposed to be. And so she just sort of tries to fade into the background because she doesn't know how to handle all the different conflicting messaging she's receiving about her superpowers, but don't use them. But I have superpowers, but we're different. All those things that teenagers hate. And you really get invested in what's going to happen with them. You understand every single thing that they want. And you're like, okay, how are they going to get them? So I love that. I think that's really cool. You're exactly correct when you say that the setups and the payoffs are just beautifully done. Everything that's set up is beautifully paid off. And while, yes, it is predictable, it's so satisfying.
Yeah.
It's just so satisfying to watch, to know that, okay, they're going to get this resolved, and then they do, and it's just done in such a great way that it's just incredibly enjoyable. The other thing that I really enjoy is Edna.
Yes. That's great.
Edna Mode is by far my favorite Pixar/Disney animated character ever. She is my avatar on the Disney site. I love her. I should probably cosplay as Edna because I love her. So any scene that she's in, I'm like all there. Yeah.
Excellent.
Those are all the things that I really enjoy about this film. And there are a couple of things that I might want to do a little differently, but other than that, yeah, I think this story really holds up for me.
I'm curious to hear what you would change too. My as far as what I would improve, it's pretty simple. It's pretty high level. I think for me, this is long for an animated kids movie, and I don't know that it needs to be this long. I would tighten up the first act, because it takes a while to get in the meat of a story, especially for a movie aimed at kids. So I would shrink the first act a bit. I would just tighten that up a bit. Like you said, I think they set up the characters pretty quickly and pretty well. Within the first 15 minutes, we get a sense of what it is. And I think we could launch into the second act and get the story going a little bit faster. So that's the main thing for me, is just getting into it a little bit quicker and tightening it up a bit.
Okay, I agree with that. And the way I would do it is to take out the foiling of the attempted suicide element. And the reason for that is because it's illegal to commit suicide. So how does this person who is committing an illegal act get an opportunity to sue for outcomes related to the commission of that illegal act? And yeah, I know it happens, but it just felt a little unreasonable to me. Why would a jury or a judge who could recognize the benefit that the superheroes offer be so leaning towards this guy who was committing a crime and then stopped from committing a crime and got hurt while being stopped for committing a crime? Why is that more sympathetic than the person who was doing a good deed? So I would take out that entire sequence and then make it about having the people in the train sue, because they weren't committing any crimes. They were just riding along on the train, and then the train crashed, and then they got injured. That would be, to me, then you take out that whole suicide thing, which is, to me, was distracting. It takes me out of the story, because I'm like, wait a minute, why would that be the outcome of that particular lawsuit? You make the people in the train sue for their injuries, doing nothing. All they were doing is just riding along. And then I think that tightens it up a lot and still makes it feasible as a storyline.
Yeah, I like that change. I mean, the suicide concept is also very dark for a kids movie.
Yeah.
Throwing that in
Yeah.
there, especially the young audience that this is aimed at. So you wouldn't need to have that. You could just have someone who's falling. There's like some accident or something, and they're falling off the building. He goes to save the same sequence basically, and like
Yeah.
you said, have it be more about the people on the train who got injured. I think that would
Yeah.
work just as well.
And the other thing that sort of took me out of the story was, of all the different jobs that the government can find for Bob,
Yeah,
insurance, really? I mean,
yeah,
that seemed also unrealistic. They could have found him any number of great jobs that he could have done that he might have been happy at. And maybe it's possible because there is this suggestion that he keeps sort of falling out of his role and keeps like sort of allowing his superhero-ness to slip, and they keep having to relocate them. So it may be that they actually say something about, look, this is the last job we could find you because you couldn't stay hidden in your job doing X and you couldn't stay hidden in your job doing Y, and this was the last thing we can find you, and now we can't find you anything. I think that having that sort of dialogue with them would make it clearer as to why this guy was doing insurance as opposed to all the other jobs that he could do that might have brought him satisfaction.
yeah,
But that was it. And those
okay.
were two very, very small things
Yeah.
in an otherwise really enjoyable story. So, yeah, that's what I might have changed as a writer.
All right.
How about themes? Did you come across any themes in The Incredibles?
I came up with a couple things that are kind of the same, maybe, or they're they're related anyway. I had sort of a high level thing of you have to be true to yourself. Maybe making that a little bit more specific or stated as a sentence would be: in order to be self actualized, you have to use your unique skill set for the betterment of the world. It's a little bit higher level thinking. And I think there's also the theme of teamwork or maybe family work, where your unique powers are magnified when working with a team. And powers doesn't necessarily have to be superpowers in this case, but your unique skill set. Sure, you can do things on your own, but when you're working together, you get an exponential growth. So that's what I had.
Okay, I like it. I like the family theme a lot. I mean, and that's really the driving force in this story is
Yeah.
the value of family and really appreciating. I'm trying to find the right word. Appreciating, embracing, valuing family. I don't know, just prioritizing. I guess that would be probably
Yeah, that's good.
the best word, prioritizing family. Yeah. So the theme that I came up with was embrace new challenges, because everyone goes through something in their life where things aren't going as they expect. And one way to deal with the unexpected life change is to embrace the new challenge. And that's what I think Mr. Incredible wasn't doing. He was still trying to relive the glory days, as Helen put it, still trying to look back, still trying to reclaim what life was before, instead of really embracing his new life as a father and a husband and a family situation and not being a superhero anymore. And the fun part of this story is that when he did finally embrace his role as a father and a husband, he got to be a superhero again.
Yeah, that's good. I like that.
So what are your takeaways from The Incredibles as a writer?
For me, I think where this movie shines is on delivering the promise of the premise. We want to see characters working together, not only in their setups, but using their cool abilities, having it be fun to watch, working together. I think that really makes this movie entertaining. So for me, make sure you're delivering on what you're promising to the viewer or the reader.
Yeah, nice. Yeah.
What's your takeaway?
And for me, I was so enamored and have always been enamored with the world building. So I have a note about just maintaining world building integrity. Just really staying within the framework that has been constructed for this world and maximizing it to help support your story.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Thank you for joining us as we talked about the story told in The Incredibles. A big thank you to our Patreon supporters and all Up subscribers. We're so grateful for your support and your encouragement. The Stories Told podcast is available on multiple podcast platforms, and we thank you for liking and subscribing or following, depending on where you're listening. It may not be a big deal to you, but it means a lot to us. If you have a favorite book, movie, or TV series you'd like to suggest for the podcast, leave a comment on the YouTube channel, and that link is in the show notes. You can find Michael Grayford at michaelgrayford.com and E.W. Barnes at 1000years.com, and those links are also in the show notes. Join us next time as we talk about the story told in Pirates of the Caribbean, Curse of the Black Pearl. Thanks so much, Mike. This was a lot of fun.
This was great. Thanks.
And we'll see you next time on the Stories Told podcast.